Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, you will learn how to set up an enclosure perfect for your isopods. In addition to that, we're also going to educate you on how you can breed them very quickly. And obviously on top of that, you're also going to learn how to actually properly care for them. Now, before we actually start, I will inform you that this is a generic video which covers the majority of isopod species. But please keep in mind that all species of isopods require different temperatures and different humidities. So just make sure that you look up exactly which species you're going to be purchasing, and just ensure that you're going to provide them with the correct temperatures and humidities. But obviously for the majority of all of their care requirements and their setup, usually they're virtually the same. So obviously everything that you learn within this video can be transferred across pretty much all species of isopods. And this video will certainly provide you with education on how to actually care for them, breed them, set them up, and actually upkeep and maintain them. So let's begin the video, shall we? So to begin with, let's actually educate you on what isopods actually do. Isopods are an extremely effective cleanup crew to have within your reptiles' bioactive enclosures. And what they do extremely well at is breaking down all of the decaying matter. For example, they'll break down your reptile's feces. They'll also break down mold and fungi from within the enclosure. And in the wild, they play a huge part in how our ecosystem actually works. And obviously, when you bring isopods into your bioactive enclosures, they obviously play a huge part in how your ecosystem within that enclosure actually works. What they also do, besides consuming decaying matter, is they help aerate your substrate within your enclosure. In addition to this, they will also spread valuable nutrients throughout your substrate. Basically, these nutrients that they spread within the soil basically helps your plants grow and thrive. They are extremely effective to have within your bioactive ecosystems. Now, what's actually great about isopods is you don't have to have a bioactive enclosure to actually own them. And you don't actually need to own a reptile to actually own isopods. Isopods are a great option for people who want to keep them as pets on their own, and are extremely good for beginners looking to get into the hobby or looking into getting a reptile in the future. Because owning isopods and keeping them on their own allows you the opportunity to learn how to maintain temperature, maintain humidity, before you actually commit to buying your own pet reptile. I will say that they are fairly straightforward to actually care for. Some species are a little bit harder than others. What's also amazing about them is they really don't require much space. And on top of that, they're very inexpensive to actually get up and running. That being said though, there are some species which do go for a lot of money. For example, the rubber duckies, that they're usually over £100. But there are plenty of species of isopods which you can get fairly cheap. So now that you have a better understanding of what isopods actually do, the next thing that you're probably wanting to know is how to obviously set up their enclosure and everything that you're going to need to do so. Now, before we do that, I have actually purchased several different species of isopods. So let's take a quick look at the species which I have bought for this video. Okay, so we have a total of 8 different species of isopods for this video. So let's go through them one by one and I'll show you a close-up of what each species looks like. Okay, so the first species on the list is the milkback isopods. Second species will be the tropical orange. Third of all, we have the dairy cows. Next up, we have the white isopods. Next on the list is the tropical grey. Next of all, we have the panda kings. Next species is the lava isopods. First of all, we have the Aimaculatum, which, if I'm correct, I think these ones look like the zebra isopods. Okay, so now that I've shown you all of the species that we have for this video, let's now go and show you how we set up their enclosures. And we'll also educate you on everything that you're going to need in order for you to be able to care for them properly and get them breeding quickly. So let's put these to a side quickly and let's show you how to set up their enclosures. So first of all, you're obviously going to need the enclosure itself. So for their enclosure, personally, I like to use this size tub. Honestly, most plastic tubs will do the job. I personally like to use this size as much as possible because not only does it provide great amounts of length and width, but it also provides quite a lot of depth for the substrate for your isopods. Alternatively, you can also use tubs like this. Personally, I would say this is the minimum I would offer. And personally, I tend to only use this size for a very small colony. And what I tend to do is get them breeding in this first. And once they start multiplying, then I will upsize them to the tub which you've just seen. Another style tub that you could also use is something like this. This will also do the job too. So now let's talk about ventilation, shall we? What I would suggest doing is designate half of the tub to a ventilation side and then have the other half where you don't have ventilation. Reason being is because this is going to be more of a moist area and this area is going to become a little bit drier for your isopods. So what I tend to do is literally simply drill 2 holes here, 2 holes here, and another 2 holes here. Again, it'll be on the side, and that usually is enough ventilation. Now, I will say that it will depend on where you live. You might find that you might need a few more holes drilled out. You might find that you need a few less drilled out. But if I'm honest, this will come down to trial and error. I just do what works for me here in the UK. So once you've actually drilled your holes, the next thing that you're going to want is obviously your substrate. So let's run through substrate with you now. Now, personally, I really like to use the Arcadia Earth Mix. I love this substrate. It's a great biomix and it's going to be great for your isopods. Alternatively, if you don't want to go for the Earth Mix, you can also go for Jungle Bio by Habitat. Again, it's a bioactive mix, great for your isopods, and they will enjoy this one too. Now, there are a few other options which you can also use. Again, you can also use the BioLife by ProRep. This is, again, another bioactive substrate. And if I'm honest, it's a really good one because it's great for humidity. And finally, alternatively, you can also use the Lucky Reptile jungle bedding. This is also a great one. Personally, I've only ever used this once or twice. I tend to obviously use the Arcadia Earth Mix, but obviously, again, it's a tropical bio mix. Now, I will quickly mention that personally, I would refrain from using cocoa fiber. The reason why personally I would recommend that you don't use cocoa fiber is because a few years back, I used to use this as my main substrate for the isopods, and I found that I was constantly getting way too much mold. And I just find that it just molds too quickly, especially when you're keeping them in a smaller container. And I just found that I kept getting colonies just constantly crashing and dying off, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized maybe it's the substrate. I changed the substrate, and obviously that solved all my problems. So now let's actually get all of these tubs set up for our isopods. So once you've put your substrate into your containers, the next thing that you're going to need to provide is some hiding areas. But on top of that, you're also going to need to provide a food source. First of all, let's go over some hides for them. Personally, I like to add things like cork bark because I personally find that they really like to hide underneath the bark. You can also get bark like this. It's like basically like a sheet version. What happens is basically when you go and lift this, you tend to find they're all swarming underneath this. But obviously, wood like this is also going to provide a food source for them, and not just a hiding area. So moving on to food source, obviously, like we mentioned, we have bits of wood like this, but I also really love to add in lots of decaying pieces of wood that look sort of like this. You want the wood to basically be like flaking off, so you can easily break it up, as you can see. But like I say, this stuff is perfect because it literally just crumbles up. But on top of that, obviously your Isopods is going to be able to hide in all of these cracks and crevices. So not only do they function as a valuable food source, they also provide great hiding areas for your Isopods. Now the next sort of food source which I love to incorporate into my enclosures, and I'd highly recommend that you do so yourself, would be leaf litter. Now there are several products on the market like this compressed leaf litter brick block. You can also get ProRep's version of the leaf litter. Again, it's just dried out leaves put into a bag. And then we do our own brand product. Isopods will love to consume the leaf litter, but not only do they love to eat the leaf litter, obviously when it's scattered across the top of the enclosure, it also provides great hiding spots for your Isopods too. Now on top of all of this decaying matter, what I personally like to do is I like to add fish flakes into my enclosures. This will provide your Isopods with a great food source too. You can also add things like dried out gecko diet. That also works great. The gecko diets have lots of valuable nutrients within that diet supplement, which obviously your Isopods are going to love. Alternatively, you can get supplements like this. This is our own branded product. It's called Isopod Fuel. I'm pretty sure Arcadia also make a version of it. But basically what this is it's a compressed supplement which is specifically made for your Isopods. So I'd always like to sprinkle a load into their substrate as well. Now, next of all, I would highly recommend adding lots of moss into your enclosures. Now, the reason why I would highly recommend adding moss into your enclosure is A, because it also provides a food source, but B, it also helps retain that humidity inside your enclosure for a lot longer. So personally, I like to always add in sphagnum moss. This works as a great option for retaining that humidity for a long period of time. This is our own branded product. Habitat make it, ProRep make it. I know that Exoterra make it too. So there's plenty of different mosses on the market for you to choose from. Now on top of all of this, what I also like to do is add in some pods like these. These ones are the locust pods. There's lots of different varieties. Again, these are more for like just aesthetics, but also for hiding areas for your Isopods. I do find that Isopods love to hide inside these little pods. You also get stuff like sponge mushrooms. Again, all of this is technically decaying matter. So not only is it decor, it's also great food source and great hiding areas. Now I will make sure to leave links in my description to all of the products mentioned within this video. So now let's actually get all of this into our tubs, and then what we'll do once we have this all in our enclosures, we'll actually add the Isopods in. So let's do that now, shall we? So first things first is what I like to do is I like to add the leaf litter in. And also I like to add in the Isopod supplements and simply turn it all over in the substrate. So whilst I get all of this stuff into their enclosures, let's quickly go over all of their temps, humidities and all their other care requirements. Now obviously all species will require slightly different temperature and humidity levels, but for the majority of species, they require a temperature range of between 21 degrees Celsius to 26 degrees Celsius, which is 69 Fahrenheit to 78 Fahrenheit. Again, just check on the species which you have actually bought. But like I say, most people's homes are usually between this temperature range anyway, which is why they are very straightforward to actually care for. Now, for the majority of species, again, it will depend on which species you have, but for the majority of species, they require a humidity range of between 30 to 90%. Now, you should naturally have a range of humidity between this range anyway, providing that you're using a good substrate and also have added moss to one side of your enclosure. Now, to maintain the humidity, all I simply do is simply just mist the moss 2 times a week, and this usually keeps the humidity up. So that's basically all you need to know about caring for them and maintaining them. Let's now quickly go over breeding them quickly. Now, I personally have found that if you simply provide them with lots of different food sources, as soon as you put them into their new home, they will basically start breeding fairly quickly. However, what I'd recommend doing is once you actually add them into their new home, close the lid and simply put them somewhere dark for around 2 weeks, and try not to disturb them for this duration, and basically try and let them settle in. By providing them with lots of different food sources and leaving them alone to do their own thing, I find it really encourages them to actually rapidly breed. And also by providing them with things like the fish flakes and the gecko powder diets and the Isopod fuel also will help get them breeding quickly, because they actually have all of the nutrients available which they are going to need in order to thrive. Now, after the 2 weeks, go and take a quick look at them, and 9 out of 10 times you'll likely see lots of little baby Isopods. Now, I will mention, after the 2 weeks, I wouldn't give them as much food as you did at the beginning. Simply just top them up on the leaf litter and sprinkle some more fish flakes or Isopod fuel. Now, you only really need to top them up on this once a week to every 2 weeks, depending on if they actually need it or not. So there we go, guys. Now you know exactly how to set up a thriving enclosure for housing Isopods. You also know exactly what you're going to be feeding them and how you're actually going to encourage them to breed very quickly. So now all that's left to do is actually add the Isopods. Okay, so we have our first tub here. For this one, we are going to do the dairy cows. Okay, next up we have the milkback Isopods, so let's get them into their enclosures now. Next up we have the white Isopods. Okay, next up is the tropical grey. Next up is the tropical orange. Okay, so now we have the final 3 to do. So the first one that we're going to do is the Panda King. Next of all, we're going to do the ones which look like zebras. Okay, and finally, let's get the larva Isopods into their enclosures. All that's left to do now is put their lids on, and I'm going to print off some labels and stick them on top of the tubs so I know which one's which. So that's pretty much it for today's video, guys. I hope that you've learned something from this video. If you enjoyed this video, maybe consider dropping us a like to let us know that you did enjoy the video. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a comment and I'll make sure to get back to you. And if you did enjoy this video, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. And also don't forget to follow us on all of our other social media platforms. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video, guys. I suppose I will see you in my next video. See ya!